In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the front brakes, pads, and rotors on this Hyundai Sonata. Located right behind your front wheel, let's get started. Use a 21mm socket, remove all 5 lug nuts, and then we can pull the wheel off. Just a little note, if yours has hubcaps, when you take the lug nuts off, the hubcap is going to want to come off, so take that off first, then the wheel. From the back side of the caliper, you can see the two 14mm headed bolts that hold the caliper onto the bracket through the slider pins. Let's remove both of these so we can pull this off. You can use a pry bar, stick it right in the opening of the caliper, press it in a little bit. That's going to make it easier for you to remove the caliper. You can pry it off with a little pry bar if necessary. I'm going to flip it back, let it sit right here on the outer tie rod. That way it doesn't pull on the brake hose. We can now remove our pads. These are a little bit stuck, so I'm using my pry bar to pry them out of the bracket. I'll do the same to the outer one. Now let's remove the bleeder screw cap. If yours still has one, use a 10mm wrench to break that free. There we go. Snug it back up really quick. And what I will be using to collect the fluid that comes out of here when I push the piston back is this little receptacle with a hose on it. If you don't have this, just let this drain into a collection bucket, but be aware that it can, well, shoot straight out. And now I'm going to use one of the old brake pads, stick it right on the piston. This is going to allow me to press in with my tool, just like this. I'm going to open up the bleeder screw and slowly press the piston in. You'll see brake fluid running down the hose. That's perfect. It's all going in here. Now this is supposed to go really smoothly with minimal pressure. That just bottomed out right there, so I'm going to close it. If you didn't have a hose like this, I would let it drip for a few seconds with the bleeder screw at the top, just to remove any potential air that might be in the system. At this point, I'm going to remove this, cap off the bleeder screw, and remove my tool. Take that brake pad out. You also want to inspect the caliper at this point. Make sure that right here around the piston area, this seal isn't swollen or torn, or if there's any fluid coming out of here, that's not good. You would need a new caliper. This one went back nice and smooth. If you had a lot of resistance, that means it's seizing in there and the piston just can't slide as it should, and then you would need a new caliper. So let's set this right back here on the tie rod and continue with our caliper bracket. The caliper bracket is going to be held on with two 17mm headed bolts. One is this right here, and the other one is right on the back side of the knuckle, actually. To get to that one at the top, I'm going to have to move this caliper and unbolt the 12mm bolt holding on the bracket that holds on the brake hose. Take this off, set it aside. Now both of these, the ABS wire and the brake hose, can move, and that's what we need, because now we can pull the caliper further out of the way, move the brake hose, and we have better access to that bolt. I left the top one in a few threads so it can hold the bracket while I remove the lower. There it is. Pull that top one off again, and there's your caliper bracket. Set this aside so we can clean it. In my case, my rotor is seized on here at this point. Sometimes you may have some Phillips head screws securing it onto the hub. Mine are already missing. If that's the case for you, you would take an impacting screwdriver, tap them, and unthread them. For me, it's just seized onto the hub due to rust, so I'm going to take a hammer and give it a couple taps. Hopefully doing that will break it free. You can also spray some rust penetrant around here. I've already done so and let it soak. There it goes. Take it off. We now have to clean the surface of this hub so that it can be nice and flat and clean for when the new rotor goes on. To do that, you can use a wire brush if yours isn't in too bad of shape. Like this one, there's some surface rust and some dirt, but that's it. If yours is severely rusted, you would use a sanding disc. Make sure you don't remove too much material off of the face of the hub, but you want it nice and clean. If you have a wire wheel on a drill, that works very well too. Now rinse it down with some brake parts cleaner. Have a collection bucket underneath to catch all the fluid. Apply a thin coating of anti-seize on the surface of the hub so that it can prevent it from rusting in the future, and it'll prevent the rotor from seizing on. But you don't want to put too much, because if you do, as soon as the rotor goes on, it squishes it and then it's going to start flinging everywhere as you drive. You want to avoid that. Also avoid getting it on the lug studs. Those should stay nice and dry. If you get a little bit on, no big deal, but don't lather them on. Take the brake rotor, slide it on, and now if you still had your screws, you would line those up. I don't. Now at this point, we're going to have to clean the surface of the rotor with brake parts cleaner. So take a clean rag and some brake parts cleaner, rinse this down, and wipe it off. We're also going to do this on the other side of the rotor. This side, it's easiest to just put brake parts cleaner on your rag. Now with our caliper bracket on the workbench, let's remove the old anti-rattle clips off of both sides. That way we can clean the bracket underneath here where they sit. Now you'll see typically there is some dirt, brake dust, and some rust. In severe cases, you're going to have to file it or sand it down. In my case, it looks like a wire brush will do the trick. All I want to do is clean this so it's nice and flat. That way when I put the new anti-rattle clips on, it's not going to push them up and therefore squish the pads. Now it looks pretty good. I'm going to rinse this off. With that rinsed off and dried up, I'm going to add a very thin layer of silicone paste. This is rated for brakes, so if you don't have high temperature silicone paste, you're going to want to use some brake grease. But you also want to keep in mind you need a thin layer, because if you put too much, just like on the hub with the anti-seize, this will squish out once you put the anti-rattle clips on. And right in the center here is where the rotor rides. You want to avoid that so you don't get grease on the rotor. So take the new anti-rattle clip, center it up, line it up, and press it on all the way. And now we're going to take the slider pin out of this side, just like that. Slide it out. We're going to use a rag and clean it. You want to make sure you do one at a time, because these, well, you'll see on one side it'll have this rubber sleeve, and this is meant to stay on the side that it comes out of so that it can dampen any vibrations and noises that occur. Now you want to make sure you clean right up in that ridge here. That is where the boot seals up, and if that's rusted, it can't seal up properly. You'll get water in here and wash out the grease. I'm going to take some of this silicone paste, stick it right inside the boot. That's going to keep the slider pin well lubricated over time. And I'm going to put the rest that's on my brush right on the slider pin. The reason you can't put too much on here is because the boot is a snug fit, and when you slide this through, it's actually just going to wipe this off if you put too much. At this point, press this in all the way. Putting silicone paste right in the boot will make it so it gets right up on the edge that seals it up as well. Give this a few twists. If there's air stuck in here and it's pushing the slider pin back out, keep it pressed in, squeeze the boot. That's going to push all the air out. At this point, we're going to flip this over, do the same thing on the other side, clean and lubricate the slider pin, and then put it back on the vehicle. Now line up the caliper bracket with the knuckle. Have at least one bolt ready so you can start it on. That way it'll hold it on while you start the other one. Snug them both up. The torque on these two is going to be 55 foot-pounds. There's one, and the second. Let's put the pads on. The inner pad is going to get the wear indicator. That's going to sit on the bottom of the bracket. Slide that in. Make sure the anti-rattle clips don't fall off as you do this. Sometimes that happens. And put the outer pad on as well. The outer pad does not get any sort of wear indicator. Once you have them on, make sure they can slide smoothly. This one's actually so smooth that it just popped right out. But basically what you want is for them to not be pinched in between the top and the bottom, and this is why we had to clean it up nicely so that the pads can move as pressure is applied by the caliper piston. If they're stuck or they don't go in very smoothly, you're going to have to take this back off and keep cleaning until you can slide them on nice and smooth. Now take the caliper, slide it over the bracket. Have your two bolts ready that mount the caliper onto the slider pins. Thread them on. Torque these to 24 foot-pounds. If when you tighten these, the slider pin starts spinning, just hold it with some pliers or a wrench, but be careful not to damage the boot in the process. Let's reattach this bracket that holds on the ABS sensor and the brake hose right on the back of the knuckle. Get everything lined up again and start that bolt in. It's a good idea to put some anti-seize on the threads of this bolt just because it tends to rust inside the knuckle. This can be a little bit difficult to start just because of the position, but once you get it started, snug it up. Bottom it out, give it a little bit extra. That is plenty tight. This is just a small bolt and it only holds on these two little brackets. Let's get the wheel back on. If your wheels had hubcaps, you're going to want to put them on now because the lug nuts go over and clamp everything together. Just make sure you line up the cutout for the valve stem with the valve stem, of course, otherwise it won't fit on properly. And now start in all 5 of your lug nuts. We'll bottom them out and torque them to 79 foot-pounds in a cross pattern to seat the wheel properly. Once again, 79 foot-pounds in a cross pattern. Double check them. The procedure is the same on the other side. Don't forget to pump up that brake pedal, top off the master cylinder, and take it for a road test.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.